Hi guys, welcome back to Binge Watch Britney. Today we are going to be covering Power Book 2 Ghost Season 3. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Alright, so we ended Season 2 with Zeke being shot. There was a lot of chaos going on. There were a lot of things that needed to be addressed and covered in Season 3. And so I'm just going to go ahead and talk about some of the things that happened and just give you guys my observations and just feedback on different things that happened. So now that Season 2 has ended, we have Season 3 starting with Davis being given a ring from Tariq that belonged to Mecca. And so they have this ring pawned so that they can make money off of it. And some couple ended up getting the ring. First of all, they had enough money to buy the ring, which is super crazy and ridiculous how much money they could just spend on a ring. Anyway, so they're in Central Park, celebrating their engagement. The guy proposes to the girl. She says yes. This woman shows up. Her name is Noma, and she's basically harassing the couple to give the ring back to her because it's her ring. And so they refuse. They have no idea what's going on, and they end up basically butchering the people and killing them in order to get the ring back. And this just sets up a lot of craziness going into the rest of the season. Who is Noma? What does she have to do with anything? And how ruthless will she be in the rest of the season? And one thing I want to point out about this scene is that this location where the couple was basically having their engagement is a very popular location. I couldn't think of where it was at first. I knew it was in New York, but I just didn't know where in New York. And it turned out it's in Central Park. And I actually recognized this location from Tevin Campbell's Can We Talk video. It's also been featured in other TV shows and movies that I just can't think of quite yet. But I definitely knew off the top of my head that I had seen that location in Tevin Campbell's video. And so that was just really super cool to see historic and iconic filming location. So next, moving on, we have Kane and Drew, and they are living in Mecca's penthouse. So how did this happen? So being that Monet and Mecca obviously had history and past together, Zeke was their child. And so Mecca did what he said he was going to do, which is that he was going to take care of Monet's kid. Specifically in this instance, it was Zeke that he actually went through and took care of. And so he left his penthouse to Zeke. Obviously, with Zeke being killed, the penthouse went directly to Monet. And Monet's in grief, and she's just completely out of it. She's rude to everybody. She's obviously distressed, and rightfully so. And so she doesn't want to live in the penthouse, so she gives it to Kane and Drew. Lorenzo also doesn't want to live in the penthouse because he doesn't want to live in another man's house, which totally makes sense. This man was trying to steal your wife, and then you're just going to go ahead and live in his penthouse. And obviously, we'll also find out later on that this penthouse is kind of connected to Noma because she was Mecca's fiance, and so that's just a whole weird situation. So he makes the right decision to not live in that house. And so now we have Kane and Drew. They need to find a new connect, and so they're meeting with a guy named Kai who has history with their family. And so they end up having a party at the penthouse that Drew and Kane are staying at, and Noma basically shows up and she threatens them. I think this happened after the party cleared out, and she just showed up. She has full access to their penthouse, and basically she threatens them and says that they have to work for her and replace whatever Mecca was doing for her operation. And so they don't quite know what they're getting into. And so it's just going to be interesting going forward to see what's happening with all of that. And so being that it was just the guys at the penthouse, Effie's not included in this, and then Tariq doesn't want to bring her in. And so Kane, he has a thing for Effie, and so he goes and he tells her, and she ends up being brought in, and then we'll just kind of get into that later on as well. So now at this point, we have Diana and Effie at Sandsfield. Diana, this is kind of her reward for snitching to her dad about Mecca and about Zeke and all of this stuff. And so it's just kind of really super annoying that she has not been outed yet as basically the reason that Zeke has been killed. And so I'm just annoyed by the fact that she's still continuing to get her way. While she's at Stansfield, she decides to hold a memorial for Zeke. Monet loses it. She is just so devastated by Zeke dying. That's her firstborn son. Obviously, they have a special connection. And so she ends up walking out of the memorial, and Tariq follows her, and they just have a conversation. She asks him for help to find out what happened to Zeke, and Lorenzo is walking out of the gymnasium, and he basically sees that they're having a conversation. Obviously, we know that he killed Zeke, so this doesn't look good for him, Monet wanting to dig into what happened to Zeke. And so, anyway, later on, we find out that Diana, just going back to her being at the school, later on we find out that she meets a new guy. So obviously she has history with what's his name, Tariq, but he's not really feeling her the way that I think they're trying to portray in the show. And so she meets someone new who's a TA. His name is Salim, I think, if I'm saying his name correctly, and he's all about Black power, and he tries to empower her and just really help her with her educational journey. Then we also have Effie being at Stansfield, and she's basically just taking Lauren's spot. She's in Tariq's class with him that Carrie was in charge of, or it was her class that they were part of. And so we have Tate and his fiance Harper, who eventually take over that class, but we just have Effie completely taking over Lauren's spot in Tariq's life, and obviously that's going to play out very well in this season, so we'll get into that in a little bit as well. So now we have Sax, who is working with Davis. He is also spying for Jenny Sullivan, but he doesn't really quite realize how much he's kind of in too deep and how much he's being played. And so we learn from his involvement with Jenny that Jenny is building a RICO case against Tariq, the Tejadas, and everyone else who's involved with that. And so she's actually working with Whitman and an old detective or government official or whatever from OG Power, Bianca Rodriguez, and they're trying to build a RICO case. Whitman is going crazy. He's not following the rules. He's doing things that he's not supposed to be doing, and he's also jeopardizing the case because he's just going off on his own and doing this crazy stuff. And so while Sax is involved with Jenny, and he's also working with Davis, he's also trying to help get Davis's brother Thea out of jail. He doesn't really know of Davis's connection to Thea, and so he's just kind of doing whatever he's supposed to be doing while he's working for Davis. So the next, we obviously have Tariq being released from jail. We have Braden confessing that course correct was his idea, that he was the one selling drugs on campus. So this means that Tariq is free from all of the charges that are facing him. But it turns out people are not too quick to forget that Tariq was involved in this high profile case. And so he is obviously the topic of conversation at school. He finds out that when he returns to school that he doesn't have housing. Obviously people don't want to be associated with him. They are discriminating against him because technically he hasn't been proven guilty. He's still innocent, being that Braden confessed to doing everything. And so he's getting the short end of the stick. He doesn't have housing, and then he gets Tate to help him with this, and Tate goes to somebody associated with the school, and he basically plays the race card to basically get help for Tariq so that he is getting housing and he has a place to live and all of that. And then also, being that course correct was named in the court case, this creates a lot of issues for Bash, who is helping Tariq with all of this. He went behind Simon's back to basically create this app and then kind of fund it, and then also pay Tariq so that he could have a legit source of income so that he could eventually get custody of his sister. And so Bash gets the short end of the stick when all of this comes out, because Simon is completely upset with him. This is something that he shouldn't have done. He probably didn't even have authority to do the stuff that he was doing for Tariq. And so he's been cut off. He's broke. He's upset. So he goes after Tariq. He basically threatens to out him to the cops or to government officials, and says that he basically needs to be paid. And so this puts Tariq in a tough situation to where he ends up killing Bash, because he can't just let Bash blackmail him. He already has money problems at this point, and then Bash is just adding to it, and Bash is a loose end because he doesn't have anything else to lose. And so, interestingly enough, I can't recall why exactly, but Kane and Brayden were on their way to kill Bash too, but Tariq beat them to it, and so this is just another instance of Tariq being ahead of the game, thinking ahead of everybody else, and actually willing to do what needs to be done in order to protect himself and other people. And so now I want to move into Brayden. So with Brayden outing himself as a drug dealer on campus, he's obviously kicked out of school. Both him and Tariq are kicked out of their room, and we actually have Diana and Brayden's sister now living in that room, which is interesting because they still have those connections, obviously. Diana knows about Brayden's family, but I don't think that Brayden's sister knows about the Tejadas. She might know a little bit, but she doesn't know the full details. Anyway, so that's just interesting that they're still keeping that kind of connection going as far as the roommate situation. So anyway, with Brayden being kicked out of school, he is forced to work at his family's company. This is kind of like a last-ditch effort in terms of his father wanting to cut him off. And so he has to work at the family company. He's working with Chase. Chase is an idiot. He's giving him a hard time and all of this stuff. And then what Brayden ends up doing throughout season 3 is making space, basically, for Tariq to be at that company as well. So we know that Tariq wants to complete his education as fast as he can so that he can get access to his inheritance. And so what he needs now at this point is an internship, and he actually goes to Tate to get an internship. But because Tariq is too hot because of his court case and all this stuff, he is out of an internship with Tate. And so this basically creates a need for Tariq to have some type of internship somewhere else. And Brayden clears out a spot for him at Western Holdings because he realizes that there's another guy there who's an intern, and he's kind of like, he's a elitist, he's a racist, and all this stuff, so he's going to be fine if he loses his internship. But he basically frames him and makes it look like he's, like, culturally insensitive, and so he gets fired, and then he ends up creating a spot for Tariq. And then we also later find out that Brayden actually paid Tate to give away Tariq's internships, forcing him to work at Western Holding. And this obviously is a setup for stuff that happens later on in the season, which we'll get to. Alright, so one other thing I want to point out about Brayden working at Western Holdings is that the only real relationship I remember seeing him in, at least from Power Books 2 goes, is that he had that little situation with Riley, but we obviously know that she was just kind of getting information. I think she did kind of like him as well, like it was real feeling, but she was primarily around him to dig and find information for Cooper Sacks. And so with him being at Western Holdings, we see him kind of falling for a girl named Kiki, a black woman named Kiki, and so that's just interesting just to see the interracial aspect of that, and just to see him kind of develop a love interest. So next we have Lauren, and Lauren is revealed to be alive. So we find out that she was saved because a man spotted her car sinking into the water and called the cops, rescued her. She's in the hospital, and she wakes up to Jenny Sullivan, and she's just kind of walking her through everything that happened. We then learn that obviously Jenny Sullivan has been protecting her, and the reason why she's protecting Lauren and has her in witness protection is because she's trying to build a case against Effie, but she's also trying to build a case against Tariq and everybody else. And so at this point, no one but Effie knows what happened between her and Lauren, and then nobody else but Lauren and Jenny Sullivan knows that Lauren is still alive. And so I'm just going to go ahead and get into the next topic. Now we have Lorenzo trying to dig himself out of this big hole that he's caused for himself. He's the only one who knows that he killed Zeke, and so he's just trying to get all of the future heat and energy off of him. And so he decides to frame somebody from the GTG gang for killing Zeke. And so what happens is him and Kane, as always, are beefing over who's going to be the next person to take over for the family. Lorenzo is really pushing for this person to be Drew because Drew is smarter, but he's not street smart the way that Kane is, and he's not really willing to be the enforcer that Kane is. And so Kane tells his dad, hey, he's still messing with Everett. He's not really all in, blah, blah, blah. Give me the opportunity. And so Lorenzo's trying to get in touch with Drew. He can't. And so he takes Kane up on his offer, and he says that he'll basically give Kane a shot if he digs into what's happening, or what happened to Zeke. And so on the side, we have Lorenzo, and he basically hires someone from GTG to beat up Drew and kind of make it look like there's something happening there as far as retaliation and all of that. And so I think he told GTG that they had that Drew had little Guap killed, and so they're trying to retaliate for that. And so Kane, he's taking his dad up on what he asked him to do, which was to find out more information about Zeke and what happened. And so at this point, Kane is able to find the pilot, and he questions them. He's basically torturing them for information, but he's able to find out that one of the pilots saw a bald man leaving the scene. And so we know that Lorenzo did it. We know that Lorenzo is bald. And so I think it takes Kane a while, but he's able to figure out that the bald person is his dad. And so basically he owns his dad at this point once he finds out that his dad was the one who did it. And then he basically takes over the family and then makes his dad be like the son, or have like the son role, and he has to like defer to Kane and all of this stuff. And so as payback for having Drew beat up and having killed Zeke, he has his dad attacked while they're doing rounds. And so that's kind of enough right now to get revenge or whatever for Zeke and Drew. Next, we have Detective Whitman. He is harassing Monet. He obviously had a relationship with Carrie. He feels bad about how she died and his involvement in it, and the fact that he couldn't protect her and all of that. And so he's really just going after Monet. Monet and Davis end up agreeing to meet with Whitman. The conversation doesn't really go well, and so this eventually leads to Diana luring Whitman to their house so that they can basically set him up and get him arrested. And so Monet, she double crosses Diana, and she actually killed Whitman, and they still go through and stage it like a break-in. But Diana wasn't aware that this was going to happen. She just thought that he was going to be arrested, and so she's just seeing how ruthless her mother is in terms of covering her tracks and protecting the family. Then we also have the Castillo family, if I'm saying that last name correctly. This is Frank's family. This is who Lorenzo had killed at the beginning of season 1. And so at this point, I think that the Tejados, Tariq, Braden, and Effie and them, they need they need more hands, or they need more bodies. And so they initially decided to take out the Castillos, but they're just saying, hey, we're too close to this family. They're like family to us, and we can't do this to them. So they decide to take out their drug connection, who is a Russian drug lord or whatever. And so they take out that crew of people. And Kane, because he thinks that Braden killed Lauren, he tells him, hey, you're going to kill this Russian drug dealer, and everything's going to be good. And so Braden knows that he didn't kill Lauren. He knows that Effie took Lauren from him, and he couldn't go through with it. And so Braden doesn't admit to any of this. He just accepts the task that Kane gives him. And so Tariq and Effie do go with Braden to kill the guy, and Braden is holding the gun at him, but he's not firing. And so Tariq has to come in, step in, and kill the guy, and then they have to flee and get away. And so obviously this is going to come back on Braden later on, as we'll see. So now I want to jump into Weston Holdings. So we have Braden and Tariq, who are kind of infiltrating Weston Holdings. They realize that Braden realizes that there's a market to sell drugs, Tariq doesn't want to do this because it's Wall Street, it's too risky and all of this stuff. And so anyway, part of the reason why Braden was able to get Tariq at Western Holding is because of his uncle Luke, who thought that course correct was a great idea, but he just thought it was stupid that Braden outed himself the way that he did. And so he understands that one, Tariq kind of is a good look for their company in terms of diversity and all of that stuff, but he also understands that these two guys are basically pretty crafty in what they're doing to have run a drug establishment the way that they have. And so Uncle Lucas, he's playing on the race issue, and he wants to land a contract with a black billionaire named Jenkins. And so he uses Tariq as a way to kind of like bridge that connection and kind of work towards getting a contract with Jenkins. And obviously Tariq is the perfect person because Ghost is his father. Ghost has a lot of business connections. He comes from a rich family, and so it just makes perfect sense for Tariq to have been put in this position for obvious reasons. And so at the same time, he also understands why Lucas is using Tariq. He's playing up the race issue and using the race to make a connection. And so what ends up happening is that Lucas, after he initially meets Jenkins at some like party or event, they're in Western Holdings, they're having a meeting in their office, and I can't recall what Lucas does, but he says something that's like racially insensitive, and basically he loses the opportunity to get Jenkins to sign the contract. And so I don't know what happens, but he ends up having a conversation with Tariq, and Tariq tells him, like, hey, this is how you messed up. And so he gets mad at Tariq for not stepping up and, like, kind of, like, fixing the issue. So he makes it Tariq's responsibility to get Jenkins on board and to get a contract. And so what Tariq is able to do, because Ghost is his dad, he has his connections, he has his resources as far as digging into what's going on, and then also he finds out that a building, I think, that was left to him in his inheritance is blocking Jenkins' plans to build a mall in Queens. And so Tariq is able to work out a deal basically to knock down the building. He gets paid for it, which increases his inheritance, and then also gets Jenkins to sign with Western Holdings. So next, I want to move on to Course Correct 2.0. So basically, we know that they can't use Course Correct anymore because it's been outed as a drug app, and Braden and Tariq really need to figure out a way to move drugs. At this point, they have decided to use Western Holding because they understand that it's a very valuable opportunities to generate more money because basically everybody in that building is using drugs, and so they're going to make a lot of money. And so they really just need to figure out a way to be able to, one, let people know about what they're offering, and then also figuring out a way to get those people to place their order and then deliver the product to them without being obvious that they're making drug transactions. And so the reason why they are having to do this is because Noma is putting pressure on them to make more money. They, I think at this point, are not on track to make the money that they need to make, and so they just really have to ramp up all efforts to make money. And so Braden realizes that they can move the drugs using coffee cups, basically. So they create an app to buy coffee. They buy actual coffee cups and things like that. And they have like a false bottom, and that's where they put the drugs. And so they are using that to transport the drugs to the customers. And then Braden also has a good idea of using a crypto company to basically wash the money. And he found out about that crypto company because of his role within Western Holdings. He was asked to do some research or something like that, and then he discovered the crypto company that they were talking about that same night that Tariq met Jenkins. And so he's able to be crafty and come up with a way to move this money and be discreet about it. One other thing, in addition to being pressured by Noma to make more money, they also have to move guns, which they've never moved before. They've only done drugs, and so this is a completely new market for them. They decide to work with the Castillos to make this connection and be able to sell to some military racist white group, and they are able to set up that deal. Because that group is racist, they need a white person to basically handle the transaction. That person is Braden. So I can't recall how it comes out, but someone in that racist white group is actually a CI, and so the meat is going to go very badly for them, basically, because of the fact that it has legal implications as far as the CI being involved and it not actually being a real transaction, so to speak. And so they get pictures of Braden. They are able to build their case against the Tejadas, Braden, Tariq, and all of that. And so at this point, again, remember, Kane has basically taken over leadership of the family. Lorenzo is in the back seat, and they're kind of beefing on what each other's priorities are. Lorenzo is saying, hey, I'm always going to put this family first. And then Kane is more of he's trying to elevate himself, and he's doing that at the expense of his family. And so they end up in a shootout, and Kane is almost killed, but Lorenzo saves him, and they're able to escape and get away. And so later on in the seasons, we obviously find out that Drew and Gordo, they and other people realize that there's a CI involved, and they go to the hospital because the CI survived, and they end up being able to get his phone and his personal item from, I don't want to say reception, but whatever department is in charge of safekeeping people's belongings when they check into the hospital. And so they're able to destroy that evidence, which is great. So now they don't really have to worry about that being used against them legally. So next we have Monet. Monet is still trying to figure out what happened to Zeke. She ends up having the same kind of like situation where she basically killed Whitman, lured him to their house. She also had someone break into Whitman's house to figure out what he knew, and so they're able to get a bunch of files from his house. And one of the files is on Zeke's case. And so she's going through that file, and she realizes that there's like a partial match, I think, to Lorenzo's fingerprints at the hangar. And so obviously this is a huge red flag because Lorenzo shouldn't have been at the hangar anyway. He should have been at the house. And so she doesn't really, I don't think she fully believes that he did it yet at this point, but she officially has him as a suspect at that point, if that makes sense. And so they end up having a conversation much later on in the show, or in the season, and he admits to basically killing Zeke, mistaking Zeke for Mecca, and they just get into a whole argument, and I think she's not willing to forgive him, and she makes him like move out of the house and get out of New York because she wants to retaliate against him, but she's also aware that she can't just kill her other kid's dad and get away with it, and so she concocts her plan for revenge, which we'll get into later as well. So next we have the gang. They are obviously working overtime to kind of generate money for Noma and keep her off their back. And so what happens is Tariq has an opportunity to go to Italy to work with Jenkins to do something. It's some type of deal that he can help him with, and he ends up bringing Effie and Braden with him. And so while they're there, they meet with the company that they're supposed to meet with. Tariq is doing his research before the meeting, and he figures out that they have patent issues, and so he's able to use that as leverage to basically cheapen the deal for Jenkins so that he doesn't have to pay as much money for whatever the deal was with that other company. So after they take care of that, Tariq and Effie, they're kind of relaxing. They're kind of talking about what they want for their future and all of this. And Noma and Obi, I think, show up. And basically they're making Tariq, Effie, and Brayden go to some guy's house named Lombardi, if I'm saying that correctly, and they need to retrieve a listening device that Mecca planted. And so obviously this is not going to be an easy thing for them to do. They're sending kids to get this device in some guy's house who is obviously a notorious criminal. And so what happens is Effie, I think Brayden, I can't remember who goes into the room first. It's either Brayden or Effie. Brayden ends up getting caught. He doesn't get the device. Then I think Effie goes in, she gets the device, and she is about to walk out with it, but she gets caught. And so what she does is she uses her appearance, her looks to kind of pretend that she's lost and have the guys escort her away and all of this stuff. And so she's able to get out of the situation. Brayden obviously gets the worst end of the situation. He's caught, he's tortured, he doesn't give up any information. But he is tortured, so that's awful for him. And so one of the things that came out of this situation is that Effie realized, that a portrait was hanging on the wall, and it was basically a portrait, I think, of Noma, Lombardi, and their daughter, or something revealing that there's a personal connection between Noma and, Lombardi. And so they're able to later on use this to their advantage. And next, what we have happening is we have Lauren finally confronting Tariq in the park. She's armed. She doesn't trust him. She's on her guard, and she just wants to get answers at this point because all she really has at this point is information from Jenny, and Jenny's doing whatever she can to make Tariq look like the bad guy, just poison Lauren against him and all this stuff. And so Lauren is rightfully confused. She wants answers. She wants to know what's going on. And so she ends up telling him that they're building a case against him, a RICO case against him, and that Effie was the one who tried to kill her. And so obviously Tariq has been thinking this whole time that she was alive, or actually I think, if I recall correctly, maybe at the end of season 2 or something like that, early in season 3, Sax was the one who told Tariq that Lauren was dead. And so I think in this moment, Tariq is actually surprised to find out that she's alive. And so he obviously has no idea what happened to her. And she tells him that it was Effie who tried to kill her and all of this stuff. And so this turns Tariq against Effie because at this point, him and Effie were dating. They were getting closer. He wanted him and Effie to be like Ghost. He thought they were a team. And Ghost and Tasha, and he wanted them to be a team. And so he's just really betrayed by the fact that Effie would do something like this. And so what ended up happening here is that we have Sax still involved with Jenny, and I can't recall what happens, but he for some reason ends up following her because she's like not answering him or something like that. He knows that something shady is going on, and so he ends up following her, and she's obviously unaware that he's following her, and she drives out to Lauren's safe house. He is not sure what this house is for. He doesn't know why she would be going to this house. And so he ends up, I think, telling like whoever to come outside or whatever, or he's like arguing with Jenny. And what happened is he's arguing with Jenny. Lauren comes to the door. He sees Lauren. Lauren comes outside, and basically I think there's some type of conversation going on between Lauren and Jenny. She's trying to get her back in the house and all of this stuff. And so Sax basically tells Lauren that Tariq had no idea what happened to her, that he was like distraught or whatever when Sax told Tariq that she was dead. And so this kind of gets Lauren's wheels going. I think this is what leads to Lauren confronting Tariq in the park. So I said that out of order. But he understands that basically Jenny is kind of playing on Lauren's vulnerabilities right now and kind of using her to make a case, but she's not doing so in a way that is truthful. Alright guys, we're going to go ahead and end this episode here. Again, this is part 1 of Power Book 2 Ghost Season 3. We're going to be doing a brand new episode for part 2 to finish out Season 3 and get into all of the good stuff. So thank you guys for listening to this episode and stay tuned for the next one. Bye guys.